Eliza had only meant to take a shortcut through the canyon trail, her basket of supplies balanced carefully on her hip, when the snowstorm forced her to seek shelter. She stumbled upon him lying half-buried in the cold, his face streaked with blood and dirt, limbs twitching as if fighting a battle with invisible enemies. At first she feared him, his dark hair, sun-beaten skin, and the faint remnants of war paint suggested he might be dangerous. But when she approached, his eyelids fluttered weakly, and his lips whispered sounds she could not understand. Something deep inside her stirred, compelling her to set aside fear and lift him into her arms, wrapping him in her cloak, knowing if she left him there, death would find him before morning. The journey back to her small cabin was treacherous. Each step was a struggle against ice, snow, and the weight of the unconscious man. His breathing was shallow, his body trembling violently as fever burned beneath his skin. She murmured soothing words over and over, even though she doubted he understood. When he groaned, her heart leapt in alarm, but she pressed on, refusing to let exhaustion and fear claim either of them. Every snap of a branch, every whisper of the wind made her anxious, but she could not abandon him, no matter what danger might lie ahead. Somehow, she knew he was important, though she had no idea why. Once inside her cabin, she laid him on the bed and began cleaning the wounds she could reach. Blood had dried in some places, leaving dark stains that made her stomach churn, but she worked meticulously, tearing strips of cloth to bind what needed binding, boiling water to sterilize her rudimentary tools. She wished she knew more, wished she had been trained in medicine, but instinct guided her hands. She spoke softly, encouraging him to fight, coaxing him to stay alive, even as she feared she had already come too late. He opened his eyes briefly, confusion clouding his gaze, and she felt an immediate bond, fragile, tenuous, but real, forming between them in that moment of vulnerability. Days passed, and his strength began to return, though his mind remained a blank slate. He did not remember his name, his family, or his tribe, yet his instincts were sharp. He could track small animals in the snow for food, sense shifts in the weather, and navigate through the forest with uncanny skill. Eliza could only marvel at his natural abilities, realizing that this man was no ordinary stranger. She had rescued him without fully understanding the consequences, and the deeper she became involved in his care, the more she feared the inevitable arrival of others, those who might claim him and take him away, severing the bond they were forming. That inevitable day came sooner than she expected. A group of Apache warriors emerged from the canyon shadows, their movements precise and commanding. The young warrior stirred at their arrival, instinctively reaching for her hand, eyes wide with panic. They spoke among themselves rapidly, in a language she could barely comprehend. The leader, tall and imposing, demanded to know why she had taken him. Eliza explained in broken phrases and gestures, recounting how she found him near death and could not leave him. The chief's son had no memory of his own, yet his life had been saved by her hands, and the chief recognized her courage immediately, understanding that fate had intertwined their lives irrevocably. The tribe was hesitant at first, keeping a watchful eye on her every movement. Eliza, initially wary and resistant, had no choice but to comply. She could not leave, not without risking his health and trust, and the chief would not permit her to depart. Slowly, she became immersed in their daily life, learning rituals, customs, and survival skills she had never imagined. The young warrior, though still amnesiac, began to respond to her presence, following her through the canyon, mimicking her gestures, and gradually forming an unspoken bond. In the eyes of the tribe, she was no longer a mere outsider, she had become essential to their family, their safety, and their honor. As weeks turned into months, Eliza found herself adapting to the rhythm of the tribe. She learned how to move silently through the forest, how to make fires that could survive wind and rain, and how to hunt small game without disturbing the delicate balance of the wilderness. The young warrior's memory never returned, yet he thrived under her guidance, growing stronger each day, his instincts merging with her teaching. Their relationship evolved from caretaker and patient into a deeper connection, quiet and unspoken, filled with subtle glances, shared laughter, and mutual reliance. It was a bond that neither needed words to define, yet both understood perfectly. The chief began to treat her with a mixture of caution and respect. He saw in her not only the savior of his son but also a woman capable of resilience, bravery, and loyalty that few could match. He explained the tribe's rules, their expectations, and subtly indicated that she would not be allowed to leave. Eliza struggled with the realization she had not intended to remain, yet she understood that her presence had become integral. The young warrior's life depended on her, and the tribe's survival intertwined with the stability she provided. She had become a pillar, whether she wanted to accept it or not.
Conflict arose when a neighboring band threatened the tribe's land. The young warrior, now skilled and confident under her guidance, prepared to defend his people. Eliza joined him, unwilling to stand aside while danger threatened those she had come to care for deeply. Their teamwork, instinctive and seamless, surprised even the tribe. Her knowledge of the terrain, combined with his natural abilities, allowed them to outmaneuver and repel the intruders. Through this trial by fire, the bond between them solidified, and the tribe's respect for Eliza deepened. They saw in her a protector, a warrior in her own right, and a life-saving presence whose place among them was undeniable. As winter thawed into spring, Eliza realized that her life had changed in ways she could never have predicted. What had begun as an accidental act of mercy had evolved into a profound and unbreakable connection with the young warrior and his people. She could not leave, she would not leave. The canyon, the tribe, and the man whose life she had saved had become her home. She understood that fate had delivered her here not by chance, but through a purpose that transcended her own understanding. And as she looked into the warrior's eyes, seeing trust, gratitude, and something far deeper, she knew that she would never be allowed to go, nor would she ever want to. The young warrior's presence in her life had transformed her in ways she could not have foreseen. Each morning, she awoke to the soft sound of him moving through the cabin, humming fragments of songs that came to him in dreams he could not fully recall. His fingers, calloused from survival and training, brushed against hers as they prepared meals or tended to the animals, and each touch sent a shiver through her spine she could not explain. Though his memory remained lost, his heart remembered what mattered most, the bond he had formed with the woman who had given him life again. In her, he found not only a protector but a guide, a companion, and slowly, a love he could not name but felt in the deepest recesses of his being. Eliza, too, found herself drawn irrevocably to him. What had begun as pity had grown into something far more complex, a mixture of admiration, trust, and a yearning that frightened her because it felt inevitable. She noticed the way his eyes followed her, the way he mirrored her gestures without understanding why, and the subtle shifts in his demeanor that betrayed his growing attachment. Nights were the hardest, when the fire crackled and the canyon fell silent, leaving them alone with their thoughts. She would find herself watching him sleep, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his brow, marveling at the life she had nurtured back into him. And she feared, in that quiet, that she had already lost control over her own heart. The tribe began to accept her fully, acknowledging that she had saved not only their young warrior but the honor of the chief himself. Elders sought her counsel in small matters, recognizing her insight and courage. Children gathered around her, mimicking her actions and learning the skills she had painstakingly taught the young warrior. Yet even amidst this acceptance, tension lingered. The outside world never fully disappeared. Rumors of settlers and hostile bands reached the canyon in whispers carried by the wind, reminding them all that safety was fragile and fleeting. Eliza's life had shifted entirely from one of solitude and caution to one of responsibility, vigilance, and deep emotional entanglement. One fateful evening, a group of hostile scouts approached the canyon under cover of darkness. The young warrior, though brave and strong, had never faced such a threat before. Eliza acted instinctively, guiding him to the high ground where they could observe without being seen. Together, they devised a plan that combined her knowledge of the terrain and his natural instincts. When the scouts descended upon the canyon floor, they were met with traps, careful maneuvers, and silent arrows that struck with deadly precision. The tribe rallied around them, following their lead, and within hours, the threat was neutralized. The young warrior's confidence surged, and Eliza felt a swell of pride mixed with an emotion she could not yet name, the unspoken truth of their intertwined destinies becoming undeniable. As the days passed, the young warrior's memory remained a blank canvas, but his identity was being rewritten with the colors of trust, love, and loyalty. He sought Eliza constantly, whether for guidance or simply for her presence. He began to share fragments of dreams, glimpses of a past life that seemed to shimmer at the edges of his mind but refused to take form. Yet he no longer feared the absence of memory because he had found something equally vital, a life of purpose beside her, a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. The tribe watched this transformation with quiet approval, seeing that she had not only saved him physically but had become the anchor of his soul.